A ruthless grab for power tears a city apart. A crime family splits in two as the young and the old fight to the death. The FBI is caught in the middle as they infiltrate the syndicate in a desperate attempt to end the brutal war raging on the streets of Philadelphia.
In the early 1990s, Philadelphia became the scene of a bloody vendetta. The streets erupted in mob warfare. Authorities feared innocent people would be caught in the crossfire. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents launched a complex and risky surveillance operation. Their mission? To bring down a notorious crime family and to stop a brutal turf war before more people were killed.
(1990). A quiet morning in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Joe Andruzzi is being wired by the FBI. He's a 20-year-old accounting student at LaSalle University, and he's in trouble. He's been betting on football through a Mafia bookmaker. He was winning at first, but his luck turned sour. He owes the mob $1,000. It's a debt he cannot pay.
You understand? I don't think you do, son. I don't think you got it at all. But you understand what's going on here.
In way over his head and afraid for his life, Andruzzi contacted the FBI and asked for help.
Get money, kid.
South Philly is a tough place. Not the kind of place where you want to cross the mob. La Cosa Nostra, the Italian syndicate of organized crime families, runs a profitable and bloody business there. Gambling, loan sharking, and extortion rackets. For years, South Philly was run by Angelo Bruno, known as the Gentle Don because of his dislike of violence. He took over the city in the 1950s. He was brutally murdered in 1980. The man suspected of being behind the hit was Nicodemo Scarfo. Nicky Scarfo took over Bruno's empire. He was a cold-hearted killer who ruled the city by violence. But now Nicky Scarfo is in jail. The FBI wants to find out who is running the Philadelphia mob while the boss is behind bars. Andruzzi's problem with the loan shark gives the FBI the perfect opportunity to collect new information on the organization. The college student meets with the bookmaker. He plays his part perfectly and is introduced to Salvatore Sparacchio, a known member of the Philadelphia Mafia.
I don't have the money. You don't have the money?
FBI Special Agent Jim Marr was the case agent on this investigation.
Salvatore Sparacchio didn't make any overt threats, but the implied threat, I'm the boss of the family, you got to pay.
I want $120 a week for 10 weeks.
The boss offers a repayment plan. Although the mob is charging little more interest than a credit card company, the penalty for defaulting on the loan has a far higher price.
Nicky, here, take some cake home to your wife.
Hey, thanks, Bob. All right.
For the next 10 weeks, the FBI gives Andruzzi the money to make his payments. And each time he takes the money to the bookmaker, the FBI records the conversation, building their case against Salvatore Sparacchio.
Each payment is evidence of the crime, of racketeering.
But the FBI is not interested in making low-level gambling arrests.
How we doing, huh?
they have a much bigger target.
I'm sure it's all there.
The ultimate goal is to destroy the Philadelphia Cosa Nostra family as a crime problem.
Nicky, some cake? Hey, Boogie, you know too much.
The tactics we use are to attack the hierarchy. The structure is the target, and we attack the target through the hierarchy.
They need more information. So on Christmas Day, when they know it will be closed, the FBI breaks into the bakery shop.
We proved to the judge that gambling activity and loan sharking activity was taking place in an Italian bakery. The judge authorized us to put microphones in.
For the next several months, the FBI records the conversations inside the bakery.
We began listening to conversations of Salvatore Spiraccio, who was claiming to be the boss of the Philadelphia Cosa Nostra family.
Although Spiraccio claims to be the head of the family, the FBI wire soon makes it clear that Spiraccio is not one of the big Philadelphia Mafia bosses. He is little more than an employee, but the FBI doesn't know who he's working for. Thinking he can lead them to his boss, the FBI surveillance tracks Spiraccio to a law office in Camden, New Jersey. There he meets with other members of the Philadelphia Mafia, including one man well known to the FBI, John Stanfa. John Stanfa is a Sicilian immigrant and a made member of the Sicilian Mafia. He worked as a driver for the late Angelo Bruno, aka the Gentle Don, former head of the Philadelphia family. Stanfa was implicated in the murder of the former Mafia boss in 1981 and was apprehended in Maryland. He was convicted of perjury in his testimony before a grand jury that was probing Bruno's death. He went to jail for 8 years. When he was released, the Philadelphia Mafia put out a contract on his life for the killing of Bruno. Special Agent Fred Walsh is a member of the FBI's organized crime squad.
Only through the intercession of his Gambino associates up in New York, the contract was taken off him and he was allowed to live.
After Nicky Scarfo went to jail, Stanfa returned to Philadelphia. He went to work in the construction business and laid low for a while.
Since he was relatively quiet. So when he started to come to power and we started to notice he was making a name for himself, it came as a kind of a surprise to us.
Thanks to the cooperation of the young college student, the FBI has now identified the man they believe is running organized crime in Philadelphia.
We had put away the previous boss and most of the hierarchy of the family. We felt if we could put Stanfa away, that we would go a long way towards the ultimate goal of eliminating the Philadelphia family as a crime problem.
On the street, informants confirm the FBI suspicion that John Stanfa is the new boss of the Philadelphia Mafia.
Once you determine that an individual like Stanfa's taken the family over, you want to see how he intends to run it. You contact your informants, see what they can provide.
Stanfa maintains a low profile. He runs things like the Gentle Don before him. He engages in traditional mob activities such as loan sharking, gambling, and extortion. The FBI wants to find out where he is conducting business. According to FBI informants, high-level secret mafia meetings are being held in the lawyers' conference room.
Informants told us that that's where they were meeting, that they felt secure there. Since it was a lawyer's office, they felt secure there from FBI eavesdropping. We decided that it would be a very, very good place to put microphones.
Agents prepare an affidavit to wire the premises.
We recognized that intruding into a lawyer's office was extraordinary. The affidavit had to go down to the FBI headquarters. The director of the FBI personally signed off on it.
A federal judge gives the FBI the green light. Agents install a hidden video camera outside the law office so they can monitor anyone who enters or leaves the building.
How about now?
A special FBI entry unit will install a hidden microphone inside the law offices. Agents make a surreptitious entry into the second-floor suite.
In terms of the actual entry into the premises, it's what I regard to be one of the most dangerous things the FBI does, because you're burglarizing someone else's property. Although you have authority to be there, the person, if you encounter someone, he doesn't know that you have authority to be there.
Inside, the agents fear they've been discovered. An armed deputy sheriff is inside the building.
The night before we went in, the re-elect the sheriff campaign moved into the ground floor. The agents making the entry were surprised by a deputy sheriff. Fortunately, they were able to conceal themselves. He got in and got out before there was any problem.
The technicians install a microphone in the conference room. The surveillance agents will first try to identify each suspect and determine their roles in the organization.
There's 18 FBI agents who do nothing but physical and photographic and video surveillances. Most of their work they did for the organized crime squad. So we've got a lot of manpower out there, and we've got people who know how La Cosa Nostra works. And we can a lot of times figure out a hierarchy just by watching the way that they behave towards one another. That, coupled with information coming from informants, can tell us who the hierarchy is.
Agents monitoring the conversations have to match the voice on the wire to the face in the video surveillance.
John Stanfa was very easy. He had a very heavy Italian accent, so it was very easy to figure out when he was speaking.
But the agents have a problem.
The conversations we intercepted in the office indicated to us that they were leaving the conference room and going somewhere.
After going to all the trouble to plant the wire, the mob boss moves the meetings. The surveillance agents will have to find out where the meetings are now taking place. They will have to place another bug.
They're gone. They're somewhere else.
A few days later, the FBI learns from an informant that a high-level sit-down is about to take place at the law office between John Stanfa and several associates. They need to get the new bug in place before the meeting. But they don't know where the meeting will be held. Agents dispatch an undercover detective to follow Stanfa into the office. Philadelphia detective Mark Pinero gets the job.
We tried to come up with a reason to actually go into the law firm to get a closer look at what was going on. So we had come up with a cover story utilizing a name of an attorney that we knew had left that firm.
But it does not go exactly as planned.
This unknown individual held the door for me to go in first, which kind of set me back because I wanted to go in second. I wanted to see where they were going before I was attended to. But I was relieved when I walked in and the receptionist greeted John Stanfa, and John Stanfa told her, "Let him know I'm here." And the receptionist immediately keyed her intercom and let the lead attorney of this law firm know that John was there and to send him in. So not only was I able to get her to identify John Stanfa, I was able to stand there and watch him go down to the actual office of this lead attorney at this law firm.
That's good. That's real good. Okay, lock it on. Thanks.
With this information, a federal court approves an affidavit for a second break-in at the office. Agents install hidden microphones in the attorney's office. Shortly after the new bugs are placed, agents hear some alarming news on the wire. The mob bosses are afraid they are being watched. They hire a private counter-surveillance contractor to sweep the law offices for bugs. If he finds a listening device, the entire operation could be destroyed. The FBI in Philadelphia is closing in on mob boss John Stanfa. They learn he is conducting mob business in an attorney's office. Agents place listening devices in the office, but Stanfa calls in a man to sweep for bugs. Agents watch as the sweeper enters the building. Their entire case could collapse if he finds their bugs.
Here they come. What's going on here?
But after a few tense minutes, the private contractor completes his sweep without finding anything.
We'll be able to.
It sort of brought a smile to everybody's face because they basically brought in an expert who didn't detect anything. So that would bring sort of a feeling of ease on their part. And I guess our expectations were that they would be even more at ease to discuss further criminal activity.
Now, with microphones in the conference room and the lawyer's private office, the information begins to come in. The FBI learns that John Stanfa is having problems with a group of young mobsters. Born and raised in South Philly, their allegiance is still with Nicky Scarfo and the Mafia regime before Stanfa took over. They are known as the Young Turks. As far as they're concerned, Philadelphia is and always has been their turf. And the Young Turks deserve to be running the crime family, not newcomer John Stanfa.
I always do the best job.
Joey Merlino is the boss of the Young Turks. Michael Changlini is the #2 man. Joey and Michael have known each other since grade school. FBI Special Agent Gary Langan is the co-case agent.
They didn't like the fact that John Stanfa, who what they considered an outsider, would come in and take over the mob family. And so they were trying to organize their own little group, even though they were part of the overall picture. And they wanted to be in charge.
Informants tell the FBI that the Young Turks are not taking orders from John Stanfa.
He doesn't run the city.
They bragged about who they were and who they were aligned with. Bragged about how they were going to take the city over. They were the legitimate successors to the previous mob members under Nicky Scarfo. They were going out and shaking down bookmakers, drug dealers, and even shaking down legitimate businesses, and weren't sharing the profits, kicking upstairs to Stanfa.
The Young Turks feel they're entitled to run the city and the Philadelphia Mafia. The aging John Stanfa, the old world Sicilian boss, resents the ostentatious lifestyle of the Young Turks.
The Young Turks, if you will, were very, very flamboyant. They'd go into the clubs on Delaware Avenue, throw their weight around, push people around, trade on the fact that they were connected to the local Cosa Nostra family, and in general call attention to themselves, which is not a good thing. If you're running a Cosa Nostra family, you should be low-key.
Wait. Hey, girls, get in the car. Jake, come on. Get out of here. Start it up.
The Young Turk boss, Joey Merlino, has a different idea of how a Cosa Nostra boss should live the life.
He was the kind of guy who felt that when he went into a restaurant, because of who he was, he shouldn't have to pay. This was easily adopted by his entourage, and they became a problem for everybody. There were fights, there were shootings, it's just not the way to run a Cosa Nostra family. Attracting all that attention to yourselves, the police begin to know then where you are and who you are, and it's just not a good thing.
John Stanfa was particularly angered by the Young Turks' involvement in the sale of illegal narcotics.
That was the wave of the future, and it's an easy way to make money. Traditionally, the mob frowns upon having its members engage in drug dealing. Now, that's not to say that they don't do it. They get around that by having an associate or something deal drugs, and then they'll tax that individual and take a percentage of it. But Stanfa, he thought drugs were a dirty business and it draws a lot of attention, again, to the family. And he didn't want to do that. And these guys were just defying him and doing it. Once we heard that there was friction developing, we were looking to see how Stanfa was going to handle it. Okay, was he going to be aggressive and, take extreme measures? Or was he going to try and mollify these people and quiet them down and get them under his wing, so to speak?
But Joey Merlino isn't going under anyone's wing. The Young Turks strike back at Stanfa. 73-year-old Joseph Gatone is one of Mafia boss John Stanfa's most loyal employees. Gatone is a bookmaker, a collector of street taxes. 4 gunshots shatter the daily routine of Joseph Gatone. The old man's blood marks the beginning of a deadly civil war. The FBI and the Philadelphia Organized Crime Task Force surveilled top bosses of the Philadelphia Mafia. Friction between feuding factions of the crime family increase, and a bloody civil war breaks out. Philadelphia police officers arrive at the scene of the shooting. The victim's keys are still in the ignition, and the engine is still running. 2 bullets penetrated the victim's neck. A 3rd bullet entered his temple. A 4th grazed the bridge of his nose and shattered the passenger side window. When Agent Marr arrives on the scene, police have already checked the registration of the car, but they don't yet know who the victim is. Agent Marr recognizes the victim from previous investigations. Gatone is a longtime member of the Philadelphia crime family, currently under the leadership of John Stanfa. Several of Gatone's neighbors witnessed the shooting, but no one can identify the lone hooded gunman. Special Agent Jim Marr suspects Joey Merlino's Young Turks are behind the killing.
Where he was killed, the manner in which he was killed, indicated to me that the Merlino faction was sending a message to Stanfa and his people. We're here, and we are to be reckoned with.
John Doe's.
Agents monitor their wiretaps. But no one is talking about the murder. Special Agent Fred Walls.
Initially, at the time that this bookmaker was murdered, we weren't sure who was involved. There was nothing definitive on the wire after the bookmaker had been murdered. There was a reference to the fact, but nothing that would indicate to us that Stanfa had a belief someone had done it or someone hadn't done it.
Investigators are certain the murder is mob-related, but they have no proof. When they speak to Stanfa himself, he claims to know nothing.
Good, Pat. Good.
But Stanfa strikes back. 5 weeks after the murder of John Stanfa's bookie and tax collector, Michael Cianglini, the Young Turks' number 2 man, is coming home after a basketball game. 2 men armed with shotguns open fire. Somehow, Cianglini, his wife and 2 children, were uninjured in the attack. Investigators recovered 12-gauge shotgun shells from the front yard and shotgun pellets from the ceiling of the living room and dining room. Despite the brazen attack on Cianglini and his family, he won't cooperate with the detectives.
He wasn't going to say anything. They just don't talk to law enforcement. They feel they're going to handle it themselves. It's business, okay, and it's none of our business. So you're not going to get anything out of them.
The Young Turks' number 2 boss isn't talking. But the FBI suspects the attack is payback for the murder of John Stanfa's bookie.
After the bookmaker's murder and then the attempt on Michael Cianglini, we believed that we were going to see an increase in violence. There was going to be a potential mob war.
Fearing this, the FBI petitions a federal court to expand the eavesdropping. In the spring of 1992, they get the court order they need. Agents place bugs in 7 new locations, including lawyers' private offices, the law library, the television room, and the lunchroom. The new wires immediately start paying off.
How we going, huh?
Early in May of 1992, FBI cameras catch Stanfa arriving at the law office with his consigliere and Joseph Cianglini, brother of the Young Turks' second-in-command. Inside, John Stanfa angrily announces that he knows the Young Turks are looking for him. They want him dead. But Stanfa doesn't want a war. He wants to make one last attempt at diplomacy. His first move is to make Joseph Cianglini his new underboss.
I guess he thought, as a concession to them, he would be able to control them. There's a saying, keep your friends close, keep your enemies even closer. This was the way to keep an eye on them. But we fully anticipated that we were going to see an increase in violence, but we were surprised by what did happen.
Informants tell the FBI that Stanfa invites Joseph Cianglini's younger brother, Michael, and the Young Turk boss, Joey Merlino, to a secret meeting. Here, Joey and Michael become made members of La Cosa Nostra.
The Code of Omerta.
You have to swear to place the family before anything else in your life. God, your own personal family, your mother, your father, your wife, your children. If the family calls you, you come before them.
Now, as made members of La Cosa Nostra, the 2 Young Turks enjoy special privileges.
Any of the secrets of our society. And if you do, may your soul...
The benefits that come with that are that you can conduct your rackets, whatever they may be, without fear of interference from someone who is not a member. The family in a dispute will always decide in your favor if you are a member and the other person is not. A member cannot be killed unless the boss of that family to which he's a member approves.
Congratulations.
For John Stanfa, promoting the Young Turks is his final act of diplomacy. The FBI and the Organized Crime Task Force will keep a vigilant watch to see if Stanfa's bold move stops the violence. But agents still need to collect more information about the crime family to shut them down for good.
Eddie!
Through an informant, they learn the law office is not the only place where Stanfa and his associates are congregating.
We found out that Stanfa had opened up a dinette next to another business he owned, which was a food distribution business. And surprisingly, Stanfa actually worked at this place every day. You know, as a John Q. citizen, he would go to work and he'd actually work there. You'd see him out there sweeping and cooking and handling stuff. But he was also meeting his family members there and discussing mob business. So the next step, logically, is to attempt to get a Title III bug installed in the dinette so that we can listen to the conversations he's having with these members and associates of the family.
Once the microphone is installed inside the dinette, the FBI hears that an angry John Stanfa is still having problems with the Young Turks. He requests a final sit-down with Joey Merlino. Joey Merlino and Michael Cianglini pay a visit to Stanfa.
So is there a problem?
that problem. Why, sure.
Gamblers are complaining that the young Turks are not honoring their bets.
Can you be more like a Joe, your brother?
Merlino assures the boss he'll fix the problem and make good on the debts.
Pay the bill. And of course.
The meeting ends amicably. Perhaps there can be peace within the family.
Arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Okay.
Early in March, FBI surveillance agents observed Joseph Cianglini and a waitress opening up the Stanfa dinette. It's almost exactly 1 year after his brother Michael was nearly gunned down at his home.
His activities were easy to document. He was regular. He got up in the morning and he went to work.
But on this morning, Joseph Cianglini's routine takes a terrifying twist. 4 men pull up and open fire on Cianglini and the waitress, reigniting the bloody war between the old and the new Mafia of South Philadelphia. On March 2nd, 1993, in South Philly, underboss Joseph Cianglini and a waitress opened John Stanfa's diner. Shortly after 6:30 a.m., 4 gunmen launch an attack. Cianglini is gunned down. The surveillance agent alerts FBI HQ and calls 911 for an ambulance. The FBI agent on surveillance arrives on the scene. Joseph Cianglini has been shot repeatedly in the head, neck, and chest. The waitress is unharmed. Cianglini has somehow managed to survive the deadly attack. Though severely wounded, he can talk.
You couldn't get a statement out of him, and even if he knew who did it, he wasn't going to implicate anybody. He was part of the mob, the Omerta, the Code of Silence, and they would take care of this on their own.
They had to know who they were. He saw them. We suspected that it was a group from the Young Turks, but he basically told us he didn't know anything.
Hoping to identify the shooters, FBI agents review the surveillance tapes. But in the early morning darkness, the images are too dark to identify anyone.
The video was very grainy, very blurry. It was very hard to identify with any kind of particularity features where you would recognize who actually went in, but you could see 4 shapes going in. Then you go to the audio and you hear screaming, and you hear shots, and then you hear someone yelling, "Move, move," and then they exit the place and they drive away. Well, that's basically all we had. You couldn't say with any reasonable certainty who actually went in there and shot Joseph Cianglini.
But agents are still surveilling the law office. In the listening post, wiretaps record a chilling conversation between Stanfa and a mob associate. John Stanfa suspects Michael Cianglini was behind the attempt to kill his own brother Joseph at the restaurant.
Yeah, Michael and Joey were on the opposite sides of internal war within the Stanfa family. They were half-brothers, and it didn't make any difference. He thought his brother Joey was on the wrong side, and he's going to take him out.
For John Stanfa, there is only one choice: eliminate Joey Merlino and the Young Turks.
So he starts to recruit his own muscle to send them out and to start stalking these Young Turks and trying to kill Joey Merlino, Michael Cianglini, and the people associated with him.
Undercover FBI agents deliver a warning to Merlino and Michael Cianglini.
What's going on, fellas?
When we're aware of the fact that violence is going to occur or may occur, and we think we know who the violence is going to occur against, we have an obligation to go out and warn them.
John Stanfa is sending hit teams into the streets with orders to gun down Merlino and Cianglini. The Young Turks shrug off the FBI warning. Even though they know their lives are in danger, they refuse to cooperate. The Young Turks should have listened to the FBI. A Stanfa hit team tracks them down and opens fire in broad daylight. Michael Cianglini is shot in the heart and dies on the street. Joey Merlino is wounded. It is clear to the FBI that John Stanfa means business.
He's taken up the challenge, and he's retaliated with a lot of force. So that's where we are right then and there. We believe that Stanfa is responsible for it. Now we have to prove it.
3 hours after the shooting, South Philadelphia police officers respond to a burning vehicle. The car matches the description of one seen by witnesses at the shooting. Police run a trace and learn that it was leased to a member of the Stanfa crime family. That night, police question Phil Coletti and his wife. She tells police she reported the car stolen. Coletti says he has been home all day. The FBI views the couple's alibi with skepticism. Coletti becomes the first suspect in the shooting murder of Michael Cianglini. Several days later, the FBI gets a lead on the second shooter.
The FBI had received a call from a physician who said that he had treated an individual who came in with burns that he felt were rather suspicious.
FBI agents find John Vincent at home. He too is a known member of the Stanfa crime family. Agents ask Vincent what happened to his hand. And he says he had an accident with his barbecue grill. His hand was burned when he spilled lighter fluid. Vincent insists the burn was an accident and says he knows nothing about the murder of Michael Cianglini and the shooting of Joey Merlino. But when investigators check out the grill, they discover it runs on propane, which conflicts with Vincent's story that he was using lighter fluid when he burned himself.
It aroused our suspicion and kind of pointed us toward Vincent more so than anybody else.
The FBI suspects 2 members of the John Stanfa crime family in the murder of Michael Cianglini and the shooting of Young Turk boss Joey Merlino. But before the FBI can bring the shooters to justice, Joey Merlino and the Young Turks try to get their own revenge. John Stanfa is riding in a 1976 Cadillac Seville. He's headed south on the Schuylkill Expressway with his son Joseph and a trusted driver. A van pulls up next to the Cadillac. 2 gunmen thrust 9mm machine pistols through portholes cut in the side of the van, and they open fire. A full-scale Mafia civil war rages on the streets of Philadelphia. Violence explodes with a brazen rush-hour attack on Sicilian mob boss John Stanfa. The gunfire misses John Stanfa, but his son Joseph is hit in the face. Stanfa's driver rams the van, forcing it off the highway.
What was really brazen about it was on a highway like that, random shots could have struck and hurt, even killed any innocent people who were on there.
Investigators have no doubt the attack on Stanfa is Joey Merlino's revenge for the murder of Michael Cianglini.
It showed you the extent of the violence these people were willing to employ and the grudge they bore against Stanfa.
Police find Stanfa at the hospital. Despite the brazen attack on him and his innocent young son, the Cosa Nostra boss claims he has no idea who tried to kill them.
And of course, it's the old, I don't know who would have done this to me. And we don't get anything out of him.
It is only a matter of time before innocent civilians get caught in the crossfire. And it's time to turn up the heat on the warring mob. Any known Stanfa or Merlino associate seen driving around South Philadelphia becomes the subject of a routine traffic stop. Authorities arrest 8 mobsters for carrying weapons. They confiscate .380, .45, and .38 caliber semi-automatics. The FBI has no doubt the Young Turks boss ordered the hit on John Stanfa, but feds can't prove it. Joey Merlino has to be yanked off the streets. The FBI arrests him for a parole violation of a 1990 armored truck robbery. With Joey Merlino off the streets, it is now time for the FBI to focus its sights on John Stanfa's crew. The agents target murder suspect John Vincent. The professional hitman is one of John Stanfa's soldiers. But tonight, thanks to a New Jersey firearms violation and the threat of a long jail sentence, Vincent has agreed to wear a wire for the FBI.
He was a very tough individual. And he did some construction work as a hired laborer for John Stanfa's brother-in-law, who was in construction. And he caught the eye of Stanfa, and Stanfa realized this kid was a tough kid, and he could, he intimidated people.
Under Stanfa, Vincent became a loan collector, an enforcer, and a killer.
Okay.
Now he claims he feels the weight of the murders he committed.
All these things, plus the fact that his brother, who really cared for him, was convinced that John was going to go down and never see the light of day. His brother convinced him that he should cooperate.
Vincent was made into the family by John Stanfa. And now he wants to get out, alive.
You couldn't measure the significance of it. It was like a coup for us that he came on board.
Vincent quickly becomes comfortable wearing the wire. He has several meetings, but the conversations don't provide any new evidence against John Stanfa.
He's out for a little while. I think he met with 1 or 2 people, nothing great. He was a little down about the fact that he wasn't getting the conversations, he wanted to. He was really into it. We told him, look, don't worry about it. We got a lot of time. We'll do it again till we get it right. It's Friday night now. You've worked long and hard for us. Go home. Go home and relax. Don't go out. We'll hook up with you again. We'll do it again.
Later that night, John Vincent runs out of luck, and the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force is dealt a crippling blow. In a bloody South Philadelphia mob war, the FBI's #1 informant is gunned down by Mafia hitmen, and the FBI's best chance at busting up a notorious crime family is shattered. FBI Special Agent Fred Walls is devastated by the news that informant John Vincent has been shot.
Well, when you hear that someone's been shot in the head, you think the worst.
But against all odds, after 3 .22 caliber slugs slammed into his skull, John Vincent is still alive.
I'm shocked. This guy was shot in the head. He's given an interview. And he proceeds to tell what happened.
Earlier that night, after he removed the wire and the FBI agents went home, Vincent ran into John Stanfa's underboss and one of his soldiers.
I know a nice place.
And they tell him, we've been looking for you. We want to get you started in your own bookmaking operation. We're going to show you how to do it. We're going to go over to this location in South Philadelphia above this meat store.
For Vincent, it was just another late-night business meeting. He wasn't wearing the wire anymore, and he thought he had nothing to fear.
He says he goes up to the room. The maid guy is sitting down with him at a table. going over figures, telling him how to take bets, how to write stuff down. The underboss excused himself, he has to go to the bathroom.
John Vesey heard the sound of the flushing toilet and the door to the bathroom opening. And then he heard the gunshots. 3 .22 caliber slugs impacted John Vesey's skull, but he didn't go down.
Vesey turns around, looks at the guy, and says, "What the frig you doing?" And of course, the shooter now, he's in shock. So he throws the gun down, and he pulls out a knife. Well, Vesey takes the knife away from him and cuts him and basically incapacitates him and throws him on the ground. He turns to the other guy, the main guy, who's an older guy, and the guy looks at him and he says, John, he said, "This has all been a mistake. It's a misunderstanding. We're gentlemen here. We can settle this." And Vesey says, "Get out of the way, or I'm going to take you down too."
And against all odds, John Vesey walks out of the room alive.
And that just goes to show you how tough this kid was. I mean, he was tough. And the bullets went into the back of his head, and we later found out they had hit the head and come around, okay? I guess the slugs weren't as strong. It was a 22 caliber long rifle slug, and he took 3 in the head and survived.
2 weeks later, ex-Mafia hitman John Vesey makes his first appearance before the federal grand jury and testifies against his former crime family. The information he provides is invaluable to the FBI. Vesey names names and gives the FBI what they need to move against the Philadelphia mob. When the FBI increases the pressure, other mobsters make deals with the prosecutors and become informants for the FBI. And the dominoes begin to fall. On St. Patrick's Day in 1994, 24 suspects are arrested on racketeering charges of murder, murder conspiracy, extortion, arson, kidnapping, gambling, and obstruction of justice. Among those arrested is Frank Martinez. He's found guilty of assault and the attempted murder of John Vesey. Vincent Pagano is also arrested and found guilty of assault and the attempted murder of John Vesey. On the same day, John Stanfa is arrested on racketeering charges of murder, murder conspiracy, extortion, arson, kidnapping, gambling, and obstruction of justice.
It was a nice, clean, easy sweep. We brought the people in, and we were very satisfied with it.
Ultimately, 27 people are charged with conspiracy and racketeering under the RICO Act. 24 defendants are either convicted or plead guilty to the charges.
I felt pretty good that we did make Philadelphia a little bit safer. It was my job. It was my life's work. I thought we did a good job, and I thought that we served the citizenry very well with what we did. We took a very, very violent group and sent a lot of them to jail for a long, long time. And we made Philadelphia a little safer.
On July 9th, 1996, John Stanfa is sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. He is serving them at the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. For 30 years, Vincent Gigante wandered the streets of New York's Greenwich Village, dressed in a tattered bathrobe and babbling endlessly to himself. To the FBI, he was believed to be the boss of New York's most powerful mafia organization, the Genovese crime family. Was Gigante crazy, or was his behavior a shrewd attempt to disguise his position as a ruthless mafia boss? That question would take years to answer.
Every family has eccentrics, even crime families. Crime boss Vincent Gigante, head of New York's Genovese family, was undoubtedly eccentric. The question remained, was he truly mad? Justice rested on the answer. Outwardly, he roamed the streets as a doggedly old man, barely in touch with reality. But in the eyes of the law, he was a cunning conspirator and responsible for murder. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Organized crime takes a concerted effort to crack. The FBI is devoted to cracking it. The case against Gigante hinged on his ability to stand trial. Was his strange behavior an act of madness or a stroke of genius?
Anyone who witnessed Gigante's ravings would have found it hard to believe that he controlled the largest and most profitable family in the New York Mafia, an organization with a long and bloody history. The origins of the Mafia can be traced back to 13th century feudal Sicilian society. Bands of Sicilian families organized themselves to rebel against the oppressive and ruthless French invaders. Mafia, the acronym for the Italian Morta alla Francia Italia Anela, which translates to death to the French is Italy's cry, became the name that these organized families used to refer to themselves, its meaning synonymous with men of honor. By the 19th century, the Mafia re-emerged in Sicily as a purely criminal culture, mostly hiring themselves out to wealthy landowners to oppress upstart peasants. More and more, the goal of the Mafia became focused on how to generate illegal profits. The tradition continued as waves of Italians emigrated to New York in the 1920s. Most immigrants lived in cramped and poor conditions. As a result of growing ethnic tensions, Sicilian Americans became the target of growing resentment. They needed Mafia protection more and more. Louis Scilero, a third-generation Italian-American, is head of the FBI's New York field office. A 23-year veteran, he is an expert on the Mafia and its intricate structure.
When they first became prevalent in New York City, it primarily victimized members of the immigrant community, where in lower Manhattan they became the victims of extortions and protection rackets. And that's how the Cosa Nostra families originally got their start.
With Prohibition, influence of the crime families grew out from the isolated neighborhoods and began to spread nationwide. A new form of underworld cooperation emerged. Various crime families across America banded together to supply illegal alcohol to a country willing to pay for it.
And I think that probably more than anything gave the Italian gangs, the Italian Cosa Nostra families, a foothold in American society. Not only from an organizational standpoint, but certainly from a financial base. Since Prohibition, certainly they then expanded into other areas.
Operating outside the law meant the Mafia had to police itself. For an organization animated by self-interest and greed, there would always be conflict and opposition. An elite group of killers were organized to enforce Mafia rules, thereby ensuring its survival. This group of mob enforcers came to be known as Murder, Inc. By the early 1940s, Murder, Inc. would be responsible for hundreds of mob-related murders nationwide. The powerful New York bosses during the Mafia's early years, Lucky Luciano and Frank Costello, set up a ruling body for the Mafia, responsible for delegating territories and duties among the various gangs nationwide. Home for America's 5 largest families, New York remained the center of the Mafia's expanding foothold in America. It remains so to this day.
The 5 New York families consist currently of the Gambino family, the Bonanno, the Lucchese, the Colombo, and the Genovese family. Each of those families are also members of the Commission and also have their base in New York City.
The Commission, composed of the bosses of the 5 New York families, acts as a criminal board of directors, settling disputes between families and making major decisions on Mafia business. Each family is governed by its administration, comprised of the boss, the underboss, and the consigliere, or counselor, who are responsible for directing their family's criminal activity. Below the administration in the family hierarchy are the captains. The captains are the leaders of crews of soldiers, the men responsible for carrying out the day-to-day criminal activity. To become a soldier, properly known as a wise guy or good fella, an individual has to first be made or officially inducted into the secret society. He must blindly obey the rules of Cosa Nostra, Italian for this thing of ours. He is sworn to put the family ahead of all else. If he is asked to kill, he must faithfully do so. It was against this backdrop, a bustling immigrant community with an expanding Cosa Nostra influence, that Vincent Gigante grew up. His parents came from Naples and settled in Lower Manhattan. Vincent finished 8th grade and started trade school, but soon dropped out. Less than a decade later, Gigante became a wise guy in the Genovese crime family. Vincent Gigante's crime career spanned a turbulent time in American Mafia history. The mob had expanded its reach into legitimate businesses, the various families fighting to control them. And in the ensuing turf wars, violence was often the final arbiter. The family that Gigante attached himself to was steeped in Cosa Nostra's American origins. The infamous Charles Lucky Luciano, responsible for organizing and structuring the American Mafia, was the family's first boss until he was imprisoned in 1936. As a result, Luciano's family administration, Frank Costello, nicknamed the Prime Minister of the Underworld, and Vito Genovese, fought for control of the family. Costello won out, but Vito Genovese began plotting his takeover. A young Vincent Gigante first gained notoriety as a mobster in 1957 when he attempted to murder Frank Costello. Within the Mafia, it was widely believed that Vito Genovese had ordered the hit to get rid of his rival. Gigante's bullet only grazed Costello's head, but apparently Costello got the message. Soon after the shooting, he put out word that he was retiring. Vito Genovese was now the boss of the family that would take his name. Gigante was arrested for attempted murder and brought to trial, but the case was dismissed for lack of a witness. The location and angle of Costello's wound indicated he probably saw the would-be assassin, but at the trial, he failed to identify Gigante as the shooter. Even for an ousted boss, the oath of secrecy remained sacred. Gigante continued to make money for the Genovese family through illegal enterprises. 2 years after the failed assassination attempt, he was arrested and convicted of narcotics violations. He received a 7-year sentence. Convicted mobsters are expected to do their time and remain silent. If Gigante served his time and kept his mouth shut, he would be rewarded after his release. It was up to Gigante to figure out how to avoid future arrests. He was a model prisoner, neat, polite, and willing to take on any job. Gigante's cooperation was so impressive that some prison officials wrote glowing reports. He was released early from the federal penitentiary in Lewisburg for good behavior when he was 35 years old. Gigante now devised a secret plan that he hoped would prevent his return to prison forever. He didn't want to leave his Mafia life or give up his shot at becoming the boss of the family. After his release in 1964, Gigante's public behavior began to grow bizarre. He became a frequent sight on the streets of Greenwich Village. Gigante could be found wandering the neighborhood, appearing disoriented and mentally unstable. Not long after he left prison, Gigante learned of a police investigation over his association with known mobsters. In 1969, he was indicted for attempting to bribe New Jersey police officers. Allegedly, he offered them money in exchange for information about surveillance and ongoing investigations in the Genovese family. Now, at almost 40 years old, he returned to his mental disability as a foil and checked himself into a psychiatric hospital for the first time. To support his story, Gigante and his relatives began to revise his medical history. While Gigante was at Lewisburg, his mother had been required to fill out a detailed family history. She said Vincent was a healthy, happy child. She noted only a speech impediment and a slight heart murmur. He had been a boxer, but never had a serious injury. By the time of the 1969 indictment, however, Gigante's lawyers claimed he was not competent to stand trial. His family suddenly remembered a host of mental problems. He'd been given to severe temper tantrums. He had a phobia for the dark. He had been truant from school. He was at one time obese and had learning problems. The incompetency argument worked. Gigante never stood trial for the 1969 bribery charges. That same year, Gigante's boss, Vito Genovese, died of heart failure while serving a prison sentence for narcotics trafficking. In the decade that followed, the Genovese family was so secretive that for law enforcement, it was difficult to tell exactly who the boss was. Even had the FBI been able to identify the Genovese family leadership, making a case against them was another story. Witnesses were hard to come by. Mobsters who violated the sacred oath faced certain death. The best the FBI could do was to go after individual crimes. There were no laws that focused on bringing down the entire criminal family. As Gigante was moving up in the family, the federal government was about to make the FBI's job a little easier. In 1970, Congress passed the Racketeer Influences and Corrupt Organization Act, better known as the RICO laws.
What the racketeering law allowed us to do was to look at the family as a criminal enterprise and to attack the family as a criminal act. That became much more effective if you look back from the mid-70s to the 80s in terms of actually indicting the entire family and the entire hierarchy of that family.
The RICO laws require that the government prove that Mafia families are essentially criminal enterprises. They must show that the crimes committed by the boss and members of his family are committed to either expand the criminal enterprise or to increase a family member's position within that enterprise. To successfully bring down a family, the government has to prove that any one of several criminal acts, ranging from racketeering and extortion to murder, has been committed. By 1979, now armed with federal legislation aimed directly at organized crime, the FBI had devoted teams to exclusively focus investigations on the 5 major families. The FBI's Genovese squad finally learned that Vincent Gigante was on a fast track with the family. Special Agent Richard Rudolph had been assigned to investigate the Genovese crime family.
Through informants and other law enforcement agencies who were exchanging information, we became aware that Mr. Gigante was an individual with much respect in the Genovese crime family and operated out of an area in Lower Manhattan. Because he was an up-and-coming person with a lot of respect within the family, we began to do some surveillances of Mr. Gigante.
With the FBI continuing to build its arsenal against organized crime, Gigante's cat and mouse game intensified. He stepped up his public show of mental disorder. In the late 70s and into the 80s, he was admitted 5 more times for psychiatric treatment. The FBI continued to keep tabs on Gigante. Agents learned that he frequented the Triangle Social Club, a gathering place for Genovese crime figures.
He could be found there almost on a daily basis. He lived in the neighborhood. He was an individual that could be found there in the late afternoons and into the early hours of the morning. And people would come to see him as opposed to him going to see other people.
Though Gigante's association in the Genovese family seemed certain to investigators, Gigante's family and doctors continuously told investigators that he led a very narrow existence. They said his whole world was confined to the block where he lived and the church he attended with his mother. He was barely functional at home and could not care for himself, they said. But with every passing day, the FBI and New York police were seeing a very different Vincent Gigante. In the early 1980s, the Mafia in the Northeast went through a particularly tumultuous time with several killings. Internal disputes within the family resulted in a string of assassinations. The FBI suspected Gigante was responsible for these gangland executions, especially those intended as punishment for breaking Cosa Nostra rules. Gigante was known to be a traditionalist. He wanted the rules obeyed, and when they were broken, retribution was sure to follow. It started with the murder of Philadelphia crime boss Angelo Bruno. Although Bruno's family was well outside New York, all families answered to the members of the commission. Gigante was upset because Bruno had been assassinated by his own men in a grab for control of the family. A Cosa Nostra rule had been violated. No one can kill a boss unless the commission sanctions it, and they seldom do. It was rumored that Gigante himself launched an investigation into Bruno's murder. Retribution was swift. Less than a month later, Tony Bananas Caponegro, identified as one of Bruno's assassins, was found dead. He had been shot 15 times and stabbed in the back. His body was stuffed in a trunk, and $20 bills were littered around his body, a clear message that he was killed for his greed. On the same day, another body was discovered. This time it was Fred Salerno, dead of gunshot wounds, dumped in a vacant lot. He too had allegedly participated in Bruno's murder. Phil Testa had taken Angelo Bruno's place as boss. His reign was short. Almost a year after Bruno's execution, Testa was blown up entering his own home. Another boss killed without the blessing of the commission. Another avenging act would follow. Rocco Marinucci was next, found dead with fireworks stuffed in his mouth. A gesture designed to show that he was killed for the way in which he had killed Testa. If the Cosa Nostra was to flourish, all of its members had to comply with its rules. There were no exceptions. Gigante was believed to have ordered the murder of one of his own crime family members. Genovese soldier Jerry Papa had murdered 2 Colombo family members without permission. As punishment for his unsanctioned act, he was brutally shot and killed by members of his own criminal family. Had Gigante become the enforcer for the Northeast Cosa Nostra? Informers within the mob told federal agents that all of these killings had been ordered by Gigante. But information given by admitted criminals is always a problem for potential juries. Criminals will say anything if their cooperation can be traded for a reduced prison sentence. The FBI needed more than the words of criminals looking for a deal. Gigante knew this, and he protected himself accordingly. It seemed that Gigante was now the boss. The FBI began a more focused surveillance effort on Gigante. They learned that the Genovese family had also infiltrated several of New York's major industries: the garment trade, trucking, garbage collection, airport cargo handling, and the city's seafood industry. Vincent Gigante was known on the streets as the Chin, an abbreviation of Cinzino, Little Vincent. Fearing FBI surveillance and wiretaps, family members were not allowed to speak his name. They were to refer to him with hand signals, touching their chins to communicate his nickname. Bringing down the Chin was going to take every bit of know-how that the FBI could muster. They were going to have to create their own luck. As a surveillance team member watched one day, a telling crack in the Chin's ruse appeared. The seemingly frail man was being helped across a busy street. When oncoming traffic threatened, he became suddenly animated, racing to safety. His helplessness somehow overtook him again on the other side. Clearly, there were two Gigantes, the mentally troubled one displayed to the public, and the determined boss of the Genovese administration. The FBI would soon learn of a third. Gigante's ex-wife and their 5 children lived in New Jersey while he maintained a relationship with his long-standing companion, Olympia Esposito. He usually called on her late at night, looking quite dapper before he was aware of the surveillance.
We learned that he frequently visited a townhouse which was located up on 77th Street and the east side of Manhattan, where we later learned that a common law, he was living with his common law wife, and he had been married previously, and this was his second family there at this residence.
Soon the FBI knew all of the Chin's hangouts. This gave surveillance teams an opportunity to observe Gigante without his knowledge. A major break came when NYPD Organized Crime Task Force member Detective Tom Bruno was able to snap photos of some of Gigante's activities.
In 1984, I was assigned to a joint organized crime task force. That task force consisted of FBI agents and New York City police officers, detectives, and we were assigned to investigate the Genovese crime family. Then the next step was to go to Sullivan Street, where Chin Gigante lived. His apartment was above a pet store, alleged pet store. And he also had a social club on the block. And when you'd go by the social club, you'd see numerous people that were in the photos. And you'd see them standing in front of, going inside, and then sometimes crossing the street, going to the pet store, which was where the Chin, we believe, met people. Pet store really never had any kind of business that we could see. It had a little cat box in the window, and basically that was it.
More and more, Gigante was seen acting normally when he was unaware he was being watched.
I see Chin Gigante and I see Andrew Gigante, which is his son, come out of his residence. And I'm just minding my business, walking up the block. Andrew leaves to get in his car, and Chin is standing on the corner, and he wasn't helped out of his building, and he was standing on the corner. Andrew gets in his car, pulls out. As he pulls out, there's a car coming up Sullivan Street. It blows the horn. Gigante yells, "Hey, what are you, in a rush?" As he does this, I come into the lighted area. He looks, sees me, and all of a sudden his head goes down and he plays the sick point.
Another break followed Detective Bruno's surveillance successes. The FBI managed to rent an apartment close to the townhouse of Gigante's companion, Ms. Esposito. An agent would exit through a back door in the rented apartment building and position himself about 50 feet from Ms. Esposito's townhouse. From there, Ms. Esposito and Gigante could be seen from time to time. An agent watched the couple for 4 months between midnight and 2 a.m. Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew Weissman, who later would have to prove Gigante's competency to stand trial, was delighted with the agent's observations.
And lo and behold, when he was inside in a place where he didn't think he was being observed, he did all of the normal things that any of us would do. As a matter of fact, what was unusual about those surveillances was that there was nothing unusual about him. He was normal. He was talking to people. He was counting money. He never wore a shoddy bathrobe. Indeed, the only time he was seen in a bathrobe was, not surprisingly, when he got out of the shower. He would wear a nice, fluffy, Brooks Brothers type bathrobe, which was not at all like the bathrobe that he would wear when he was on the street. So it became pretty obvious to the people conducting the surveillance that he was engaging in a concerted effort to give an appearance to the public that was false, that was not the way he behaved in real life.
Investigators continued to watch Gigante's bizarre public behavior. But photos themselves are only a single link in proving criminal activity. Investigators needed hard evidence to corroborate what the photos were suggesting, that Gigante was in fact the boss. One wiretap conversation between Genovese crew members gave investigators more proof of Gigante's position in the family. On the tapes, known Genovese members were complaining about the chin. Assistant U.S. Attorney George Stamboulidis reviewed these tapes to help prepare a case against Gigante.
He's constantly nitpicking his men, trying to always, with a million questions, drilling them and questioning them on what they're involved in. He's always looking to get money from them, or money from some of the schemes and how he earned, and how much money he would make from the gambling operations at the Triangle Social Club and things like that.
While Gigante micromanaged the internal affairs of his family, the tabloids began calling him the Odd Father.
He would check himself in to a hospital once a year for what his colleagues in the Mafia sarcastically referred to as tune-ups, so that he would have a paper trail showing that he had some, or giving the impression that he had some mental condition. And with the assistance of people around him and people in his family, he was able to cultivate this paper trail, giving the impression to anyone who looked at the cold medical records that here's someone who, year in, year out, was being treated for some form of mental illness.
Gigante knew how to protect himself, both publicly and privately.
Mr. Gigante was very clever in how he conducted business, and he limited his contacts with members of the family. If there were messages or items to be discussed regarding illegal activities conducted by the Genovese family, there would be messages passed on to people immediately surrounding him. Access to him was very limited. If the other family wanted to meet with him, more than likely they would have to send a message.
Gigante avoided the normal sit-downs or more formal meetings held regularly by other family bosses. He would take meetings when businesses demanded his attention. He and his visitors would stroll the sidewalks through the neighborhood, ensuring that surveillance wiretaps would not pick up any incriminating conversations. The always careful Gigante also suspected Ms. Esposito's phone was tapped, and it was. He never talked business on the phone. He would simply use a payphone or make arrangements to talk elsewhere. The FBI would not be able to use the Chin's own words to make a case against him. Other mobsters were not as smart. Sophisticated bugging operations were allowing the FBI to capture a multitude of other mob business on tape. In early 1985, the Justice Department was bearing down hard on a number of high-level organized crime figures. Most were being charged under the RICO Act. Though RICO had been around since the early 70s, it was only now receiving its first real test. Two of Gigante's men had gotten wind that the bosses of the Gambino and Lucchese families would soon be arrested. They wondered if the Chin was vulnerable. One commented that if he gets pinched, all those years in the asylum would be for nothing. On February 19th, the arrests of several crime family bosses were made. The next day, Vincent Gigante checked himself into the hospital and stayed a week. He had successfully avoided the indictment against the New York bosses. Among those arrested was Paul Castellano, head of the Gambino crime family. Prosecutors never brought him to trial. He was killed before they had the chance. By Cosa Nostra standards, the unsanctioned murders of Gambino boss Paul Castellano and his underboss Tommy Bellotti were unpardonable. Although John Gotti, a captain in the Gambino family, acted shocked at Castellano's death, it was widely believed that he was responsible. Within 2 weeks of the murders, Gotti had publicly taken over as boss. Vincent Gigante issued a subtle warning to Gotti. Without mentioning names, he told Gotti that the murderer would have to pay. It took 2 years, but in 1987, Gigante acted to avenge the murder of his friend and partner in mob business. Through his counselor, Bobby Manna, and some Lucchese family members, Gigante plotted to have Gotti killed. The planning session at a New Jersey restaurant was bugged, and because it was, the FBI saved John Gotti's life. If agents intercept information of a murder plot, they are required by law to try to prevent the killing. So based on the tape, agents warned Gotti. Acting on the FBI warning, John Gotti changed his plans on the day the murder was to take place. Because he was not where he was expected, the murder plot failed. Gigante, however, did not give up. He asked Vic Amuso, acting boss of the Lucchese family, to supervise another hit. It was up to Amuso and his men to work out the details.
And that was to have Amuso reach out to Al Diarco, one of his trusted men, just as Manna was one of Gigante's trusted men, and have Diarco use his contacts in other parts of the country to acquire a remote-controlled bomb.
But Gotti was arrested and imprisoned before the second plot could be carried out. He died of cancer while serving a life sentence for racketeering involving extortion and murder, including Castellano's. Meanwhile, the FBI had Chin's men on tape conspiring the murder. As the FBI's investigation into Genovese family operations continued, information about a corrupt construction scheme was coming to light. They learned that for years, much of the Genovese family income came from one segment of the construction industry, the window business. The family had managed to keep its hold on window replacement jobs for all of New York City's public housing projects.
We learned that at that time there was an enormous amount of money being put into refurbishing some of the New York City Housing Authority windows. There was an energy crisis underway, and the timing of this was ideal for the organized crime people to become more active in it. What we learned was that the Genovese family along with 2 or 3 other families, were becoming involved in companies that were bidding and installing the windows in some of these housing projects. From the late 1970s up until the late 1980s, there was approximately $190 million worth of contracts given out by the city of New York for the window replacement industry.
It was classic mob business and a textbook example of racketeering. The Mafia took over an industry to the exclusion of legitimate businesses. Union officials were corrupted. In this case, Iron Workers Local 580. Bids were rigged, and companies or workers trying to play by the rules lost out. For years, the Lucchese and Genovese families operated their construction schemes autonomously. By the early 80s, they realized that a partnership would be much more profitable. By this time, the Lucchese family had a firm hold on Local 580, and the Genovese family had corrupted several contractors. They cooperated because it meant more business.
By using the Local 580 as a tool, they were able to exclude several contractors from coming in and bidding on some of these projects, and in essence created a somewhat of a monopoly for themselves.
On nearly all city housing authority work, and on much of the new construction for the city, the Genovese contractors and installers paid $2 a window. $1 went to the Lucchese family, 25 cents to the collector, and 75 cents to the boss for the family's role in handling the union. The other $1 went to the crooked union officials who looked the other way as jobs went to non-union workers. Refusal to cooperate often carried a penalty of violence. In the late 80s, a carpenters union delegate had both of his legs broken by Genovese men for refusing to cooperate, though he maintained that he was unable to get a good look at his attackers. And in 1992, a delegate from Local 580 was shot and killed coming out of his house on Long Island over a disagreement with his Cosa Nostra contracts. The Lucchese and Genovese family arrangement was working very smoothly. That is, until Peter Savino was persuaded to wear a wire. Savino was a Genovese soldier and point man for the window racket.
We built a case on him, a murder case on him, and it was sufficiently compelling that he realized, like many of these people, that he didn't want to die in jail. So what did he do? He decided to cooperate. And for an 18-month period made tape recordings of people in the Genovese family and people in the Lucchese family operating this scheme.
Vincent Gigante didn't realize Peter Savino was turning on him. He was happy with Savino's work and satisfied with the window scheme's progression. Savino kept track of the money. He managed the contracts. He supervised the bids. He arranged the payoffs. The boss was happy, but some Genovese family members began to suspect Savino. When bodies were found in the basement of a building he owned, Genovese members were surprised that he was never seriously investigated by law enforcement.
As a result of that, people speculated, well, Savino wasn't arrested, yet these bodies were found in a building that's tied to him. Maybe he's cooperating, but nobody was really sure.
Savino was a cash cow for Vincent Gigante. He was bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Genovese family every month. So when Gigante was told of Savino's betrayal, he chose not to believe it and initially refused to order him killed. Savino continued to wear the wire, trying to get other family members to acknowledge Chin and his position as boss of the family. Gigante's troops, however, could never be persuaded to break the boss's rule about not mentioning his name.
Remember Uniseal? Vincent had said when it came time to bid. Oh, okay, I'll mention him. He had said to go out and bid the work.
It was, don't mention that name. How can you talk like that? That was pretty damning proof. Even though it didn't give you a specific crime, it told you that this was a man to be feared. It was hardly somebody who was incompetent.
Shortly thereafter, it came to Gigante's attention that Savino was in fact cooperating. Furious at this betrayal, Gigante ordered the murder of Peter Savino. By that time, the FBI had relocated Savino well out of Genevieve's family reach, but not before he supplied agents with thousands of hours of taped conversations.
Mr. Savino was also in a position to provide us with the historical aspects of how this scheme developed, his relationship with the leaders of both the Lucchese and Genovese crime family, and what their participation was in this thing. Mr. Savino also was able to tell us how the various members of all of these families interacted with Local 580, which was used again as the tool to make the scheme work.
The FBI was successfully employing the RICO laws to bring down New York's most powerful bosses. As a result, high-ranking family members saw that their only way to avoid long prison terms was to cooperate. Among them were Gambino family underboss Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Gigante was finally arrested and charged under the RICO laws with ordering 6 people murdered, conspiring to kill 3 others, and at least 24 counts of racketeering. In short, Gigante was charged with being the boss of the Genovese crime family. But Gigante still had his mental illness history to fall back on.
Mr. Gigante was indicted in May of 1990, and a second indictment was filed against him in June of 1993. The case against Mr. Gigante was unusual, that it spanned several years before it actually went to trial. He eventually went to trial in June of 1997. During that period of time, the issue that was before the courts was that whether he was competent to stand trial or not. That issue was finally resolved in 1996.
7 years after his arrest, a federal district judge declared Vincent Gigante competent to stand trial. Vincent the Chin Gigante was 69 years old when a jury convicted him of conspiring to kill 3 Mafia figures, including Gotti and Savino. He was also found guilty of extortion and union payoff conspiracies in the window replacement scheme. But jurors failed to convict him on charges of directly ordering 6 murders. Now that Gigante was convicted, his defense lawyers argued that he was not fit to be sentenced. They claimed he was too old, too frail, and too mentally incompetent to understand the punishment. While awaiting sentencing, Gigante was confined to a prison hospital and examined by several doctors. Gigante was given several PET scans, a procedure that uses a radioactive tracer to measure brain chemistry. A 1991 scan, first read as normal, was later found to be too flawed to use in diagnosis. A 1993 scan did show some abnormalities. But at least one expert, Dr. Jonathan Brody, judged these abnormalities as not consistent with dementia. Dr. Brody is an attending psychiatrist at New York's Bellevue Hospital and a professor at New York University's School of Medicine. He also conducts research on schizophrenia.
Mr. Gigante, at the time of the scan, was purportedly taking medication that affects the brain. And because it affects the brain, it affects brain chemistry, and brain chemistry is what a PET scan is all about.
Gigante was taking an antipsychotic medication, and antidepressants, a low-potency tranquilizer, and sleeping pills. So Dr. Brody was skeptical about the PET scan, but had yet to examine the patient.
When the 3 of us entered the observation room, the examining room where he was then brought, I was struck at first by his appearance, which I said made me think, oh my God, he really is sick. I've missed the boat. He's really very sick. He came in wearing a bathrobe. He was shuffling. He was mumbling. He was making allusions to God.
But as the examination progressed, some of Gigante's actions began to raise doubts.
But one of the things that really struck me was that I didn't note at the time, but I noted a few seconds later, was when I put out my hand for him to shake it, he didn't shake it. And that's a very automatic behavior. You put your hand out, your worst enemy can put his hand out to you, and you tend to take it.
How about this way?
When Gigante was asked the names of his children, he didn't know. When he was asked where he lived, he didn't know.
And yet, these are things that people tend not to forget. You know, the brain in a dementia tends to work on the process of accounting. The last in, first out. So recent memory tends to be lost, but that's why people who are very demented can often remember very well events from long ago, even if they can't remember recent events. Well, he was not consistent on that. Indeed, he was asked the question about who the President of the United States was, which is a standard question on a psychiatric mental status evaluation. And he scratched his head and he looked perplexed and he said, I should know that. I should know that answer. It's in there somewhere. And some more questions were asked. He said, I really should know that. And then finally he said, Bush. George Bush. And I sat there and thought, oh, he remembered the question. What was striking was not that the answer was incorrect. What was striking was that the question was remembered despite all of the interfering questions.
And there were other red flags. He seemed to understand abstract concepts. Dr. Brody asked Gigante if he was proud of his children.
Now, pride is really quite an abstract notion. And his response was, yes, they're all working. Legitimate jobs. Legitimacy? Well, that wasn't even a question. Legitimate implies yet something else, that he was able to abstract from the question some intent as to what the question was involved with, and awareness of a distinction between legitimacy and illegitimacy. And here was a man who didn't know what month it was. He didn't know if he was in a hospital.
These and other inconsistencies contributed to Dr. Brody's conclusion that Gigante did not suffer from progressive dementia, vascular dementia, or schizophrenia. Guards assigned to watch Gigante during his pre-sentencing hospitalization also found his behavior normal. They testified that he was active around his prison hospital cell and polite to the hospital staff. He did not need help to shower, to groom himself, or to feed himself.
The lawyers all put in affidavits that they couldn't communicate with Vincent Gigante at all. Well, when he was in jail, he managed to speak with the prison counselors. When you sort of talk to the sort of low-level people in jail who have to take care of inmates on a day-to-day basis, it turns out he knew exactly what had happened. He knew he had been on trial. He knew that Gravano had testified against him and didn't have very nice things to say about him. He knew that his sentencing was upcoming. He knew what the issue was before Judge Weinstein as to that he had to decide that he was competent to be sentenced. It was completely at odds with what his lawyers were telling Judge Weinstein.
Some psychiatrists thought Gigante really was incompetent. Others thought he was faking. 5 months and dozens of tests later, the judge ruled. The judge said, In short, the defendant's cognitive and emotional capacity and his communication skills are equivalent to other 69-year-old defendants with limited education. No hallucinations interfere with his abilities to participate in sentencing. He understands the fundamentals of criminal substantive law and procedure. He is deliberately feigning mental illness to avoid punishment which he fears. Defendant is competent to be sentenced and to serve an appropriate term in prison. Shaliro described efforts of the FBI and prosecutors as historic and courageous.
This has been a battle that certainly I've been involved with for the last 20 years, and certainly I think agents that will continue that on over the next 5 or 6 years. If the effort could be sustained and the resources maintained, I think we're on the verge of really reducing the effects and the impact of the Cosa Nostra.
To be sure, the government's legal victory in the Gigante case was partial. The jury, after all, failed to convict him of the 6 murder charges. He was originally sentenced to 12 years. In 2003, he pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and earned 3 more years, finally admitting in court that he had been faking insanity the entire time.